Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Bizos. Can you give us some sense of your thoughts and feelings since you heard about Madiba's death?
I was telephoned late on Thursday night. Firstly, that things were not looking good, and then a subsequent call about an hour and a half later that he had passed away. Since then, I hardly think about other things other than difficult and sometimes joyous occasions that we lived through together in the last 65 years when we met as students at this university. I try to be stoic about it, that none of us are immortal, that he had a good innings. He was an example to all of us, not only in South Africa, but in Africa and the world at large, as to what is expected of a leader and what duties he undertook for himself. That he did not exercise authority for his benefit or the benefit of his family, but tried to govern as a democratic leader for the benefit of all of us, and tried to accelerate the introduction of the numerous programs which would put an end to the apartheid regime's practices, and that there would be an egalitarian society established in our country. I don't believe those who say that nothing has changed. We only had 8 black students in the faculty when I was here. I attended the graduation ceremony here and at other universities. The majority of the graduates are black. We only had 3 women who didn't get a degree in our faculty. They gave up along the way. And today, the majority of the graduates in the law faculty are women.
You've spoken about him as a statesman, and at the memorial we heard about him as a statesman, a nation leader, a great leader. But can you give us insight into Madiba, the day-to-day Nelson Mandela? How was he as a friend?
I saw him in jail regularly throughout his 27 years. The first questions were, how's my wife? How are my children? How are your children? How's your wife? How's your practice going? He was very, very keen not to speak about his conditions and the way he was treated. This is not uncommon for prisoners. Prisoners don't want to speak about what is happening to them in prison. They want to be informed what is happening outside. Particularly political leaders and people that I've defended who were sentenced to lengthy terms of imprisonment. He wanted to be informed of what was happening. He himself had a mission as a prisoner to convert particularly his Afrikaans-speaking captives, that they had nothing to fear in relation to their language or their safety when fundamental change came about. And he tried very hard to persuade. He certainly persuaded the warders but not the brigadiers that were given instructions to the warders that were on the island, and the brigadiers were in Pretoria. They resented the high-ranking officers that Nelson Mandela was speaking Afrikaans to his warders. And one of the brigadiers actually became so angry that ordered him to change to English because his accent offended him. What he really ought to have said was his true feelings. Stop trying to persuade our people that they have nothing to fear. He was convinced that fundamental change would have to come. But he had to persuade all the people of South Africa that they had nothing to fear from fundamental change. He believed that the vast majority of the people in South Africa, be they black, white, Afrikaans speaking or English speaking, whether Christians or Muslims or some other faith, none of them wanted a bloodbath in South Africa. And he worked very hard to persuade the vast majority, because he believed that the left flank and the right flank, governed by principles of fanatics and not humanists, was something that he had to cultivate and bring about. He succeeded.
Do you think he ever lost hope? Do you think he knew that he would walk out
He
as
never
our
felt sorry
democratically elected president?
He never felt sorry for himself. The only time that he was really down was when they refused him permission to go to his mother's funeral, and even equally so when they refused him permission to go to the funeral of his son that died in an accident. He never had any doubt that the dawn of freedom would break during his lifetime. He gave a lot of courage to the other political prisoners, many of whom I had defended. And even the people who took part in the struggle, and they would be brought before the courts, and you would ask them, what is your defense? Yes, I was a member of the underground. And what is your defense about the charge that you are about to face? The Mandela defense. I did nothing morally wrong. The people who are oppressing us, they should be in the dock. He believed in that. He advocated it. He had faith that dawn would break.
When you go back to the Rivonia Trial, did you have any doubt in your mind that this was a man who would, as he said, die for what he believed in?
Well, I got an amendment to his statement because I warned him that if he said that he is prepared to die, he will be accused of seeking martyrdom. The judge may consider it a challenge. The government would say he got what he asked for. And I persuaded him to add the 3 words in the last 2 sentences of his statement. The words, if needs be, because he had said that he was prepared to die so often on political platforms that he felt that if he did not say it from the dock, people would say, well, it was just bravado in days gone by. Now that he is facing it, he doesn't say it. He said, no, I'm going to say it. But we achieved this compromise that he actually qualified it if needs be, I am prepared to die. He meant it.
What was the possibility there in all your minds? Was death a possibility that you were all thought of all the time?
Right from the time that the arrests were made in Rivonia in June 1963, right up to the conclusion of the trial, the National Party supporting press was shouting from the rooftops and their front pages practically every day, disregarding the sub judice rule that there could only be one sentence, and that was the death sentence. What happened in October, after the indictment was quashed because of the slovenly work of the prosecution and the genius of Arthur Chaskelson and Bram Fisher of our legal team that quashed the indictment, the world said, release them, believing that the quashing of the indictment was equivalent to an acquittal, which in law, of course, was not so. But it was picked up throughout the world. During the Cold War years, by both sides, the West and the East, and the non-aligned people, and they're all calling for the release of the Rivonia accused. And even if the governments found it very convenient, like the United Kingdom, the United States, and France, to do business with South Africa, their young people, particularly at the universities, the intellectuals, the writers, the filmmakers, were shouting from the rooftops, release these innocent, politically innocent people, because the government said that they are no different than the gangsters of Germany, the Red Brigades of Italy, or the terrorists of Palestine. When the policy was, in fact, yes, we will use violence, but with the proviso that there would be no loss of life. And what did happen eventually? It took the banks in the United States, in the United Kingdom, in Switzerland, to say in 1985, South Africa, we are not prepared to renew what you owe us because of your apartheid policies. And that was really the turning point of the demise of the apartheid regime.
Did he know about the global solidarity? Did he know how many people were standing around the world supporting him? Did that give all the trialists hope?
Not only that, but the government in '85 tried to persuade Mandela that if he denounced violence, if he denounced communism, if he denounced terrorism, if he stopped communicating with the Oliver Tambo and the others outside, that they would release him. They would send him to the Transkei, so that it wasn't too much of a shock or to their constituency, the government's constituency. And Mandela actually sent a message to them through me to the Minister of Justice, Kutsia, who was making these proposals, that I want to be the last political prisoner to be released from South African jails. They wanted him to become a Bantustan personality in the Transkei. he wasn't going to fall for it.
You've spoken about that amazing compromise on the quote that he said from the doc, and we hear that sometimes he would listen and compromise. Sometimes he would make a decision and stick to it. He was a strong leader.
Of course he was a strong leader, but he knew that he had to persuade the vast majority of the people of South Africa, whether they were black or white, that democracy was something for the benefit of all, and particularly the white Afrikaners had nothing to fear when fundamental change came about. And he lost no opportunity to let Afrikaners know that he cared for them. He was ill in a hospital in Cape Town, looked after by two Afrikaner, very beautiful young nurses. And I was visiting him there on very important business. Kubikutsia was waiting for a response. And he looked at his watch and said, "George, in 15 minutes, these nurses have to knock off. They've got families to go to. We are going to interrupt our conversation because they have to administer my needs before they go off work." Speaking to them in Afrikaans. Kom julle. And Jimmy Kruger asked him if he could do something about him. Jimmy Kruger was left cold with the death of Biko. And he said, asked Mandela, "Can you do something for me?" For him. And Nelson said, "Studying Afrikaans through UNISA. And the main poet of Afrikanerdom works are not in the library. Put them in." Within a week, the publisher sent complete works of the poet to the library, and he sat down in very proper Afrikaans. I think Neville Alexander actually helped him. He wasn't so. Writing to the publisher, thanking them profusely for making the books available. But the last paragraph said, "A written thank you is hardly enough." He looked forward to the nearby day when he will be able to call on them to thank them personally. And they Sondag News, which was the predecessor report, published his letter in his own handwriting on the front page in order to persuade people that they had nothing to fear from the person who they knew would be the leader of the people of South Africa.
My last question then for you is, do you think we have something to fear? Has the ANC, has South Africa, has the world lost a moral compass?
The only fear you have is that you mustn't fear. You must stop fearing. Nelson Mandela became upset when it was suggested that South Africa is a one-man show. He made it his business to send his deputy president Mbeki to the United States and Europe and all over the world, his ministers, his provincial leaders, in order to prove to the world and to us all that it's not a one-man show. And although we may have complaints against, the justified complaints against some of our people who are in government, we have a wonderful constitution, we have independent courts, we have independent media, the center is holding, there are fanatics on the left and some fanatics on the right, but they will not overcome. The center will overcome.